All right, here we go. Week 2 of the WCC is in, and we have the first big upset of the not of the conference season. Santa Clara knocking off Gonzaga 77-76. I am joined by Connor Hope from the Heat Check podcast, the Field of 68. It's like, Connor, you were there. I mean, we haven't seen this happen since 2011. It's been 13 long years for Santa Clara since they've last beat Gonzaga. Your initial thoughts on just what you saw from both teams tonight, and we'll start with the Zags because obviously, like, this is a team that seems to be kind of stuck where they are, and then they're very identifiable problems, but maybe not many solutions.
Yeah, I mean the lack of depth, the lack of shooting, um, and really like I think the overall lack of athleticism that we've seen Gonzaga teams in the past, even though Gonzaga teams in the past may not have been the most overly athletic, I think this team certainly doesn't seem as athletic as we have the past 5 to 7 years. Um, that can't be fixed. And there are players on this team that have shot better than they have this year. And there are players on this team like Nolan Hickman who are about what they've shot, but uh, not consistently. Um, I don't think this team and the way that the body language of this team indicates that that's an issue that they feel confident in fixing. There seems to me to be a lack of confidence with this team, given the issues that they've had, that only gets exacerbated in the final 10 minutes of games when it's a lack of confidence and a lack of, not even conditioning, but depth, which causes them to get tired at the end of these games. And it's a lack of confidence because pretty quickly in this game, they went away from setting up catch and shoot opportunities and going more towards ISO ball. And it wasn't working, but it was working better than shooting. And you had a lot of these passes that were intercepted or tipped away because they kind of telegraphed the pass into the paint or into one of the bigs, in the high post or something. And it just wasn't working. And I think there are issues that maybe could be fixed down the stretch of this is not a team built to play in transition. This is a team, and I've said it before, that's built to play like the 2016, 2017 team, where they still had a pretty good tempo, but you weren't gonna send Shemek Karnowski down the floor off of rebounds and turnovers to go get a transition basket for you. Gonzaga's issues for the first time really in a really long time are pretty much offensive. Like they have defensive issues, but I think the issues that are preventing them from winning games are almost exclusively offense. And that's not something that I think anyone expected to say about a Mark Few coached team anytime soon.
No, we think about these Gonzaga teams, just how lethal they have been on the offensive end for the last 20 years. I mean, you can just list off the number of just so the powerful offenses, great shooters that this team has had. And you're right. It's like that is something that is so foreign to see be a kind of a detriment to this team, that they're not a good shooting team, that they do get stagnant at times. I kind of half joked, I think, a few games ago that they almost looked St. Mary's esque offensively when it came to some of these scoring droughts. But this Gonzaga team also, the one thing that was also odd is that usually we're also used to seeing them come back. And yes, Gonzaga did make a run in the second half of this one. It seemed like the energy also just wasn't there in the first half. Santa Clara kind of was what dominated on the glass, on the offensive rebounding front. EK did get an early foul trouble, but it also just seemed that, like, even though they were only down 6 in by the end of the half, it just seemed that Gonzaga's energy just wasn't there outside of, I would say, Anton Watson.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing is that Watson is the player on this team that fits everything Mark Few wants to do. he's the player on this team that I think has the most confidence, the most physicality. Uh, you can tell he gets frustrated at times when things aren't going well, but he doesn't seem to shut it off as much as some of these other players do towards the end of these games. And the big issue is that he's playing 40 minutes a game, and it's just not sustainable. I mean, you see him at the end of the game, to this game, trailing the offense by about 5 to 10 seconds, sitting in the corner with his hands on his shorts. Um, the timeout that at the end of the game before the free throw was specifically called, I think, because they needed to give Anton time so that he could get the rebound, which ultimately happened. Got the rebound, but then they didn't have the timeout to stop play and draw something up to get an open shooter. And we saw he threw the ball to, the best player he thought he could. And it got intercepted. And I think playing one player 40 minutes a game is a lot, especially when they're big. Playing three players for 40 minutes a game, uh, that's just not something that you can sustain and win a ton of basketball games in a row, especially not on the road.
And we've seen a lot of that. We've seen a lot of Anton Watson, Ryan Nembhard, Nolan Hickman playing 40 minutes a night, especially against some of the better opponents that they've seen. I think it was, you can kind of go down the list, whether that be Purdue or whether it was UCLA at the time. One of the better games, UCLA, USC, obviously tonight against Santa Clara. So we've seen this already a lot this year, and it really doesn't seem that sustainable for this team to keep doing this. But speaking of someone who could have actually maybe gotten a few more minutes, it did seem a little odd late in that contest that Braden Huff didn't actually play more in the second half, because he was a guy who actually played really well he played 19 minutes, he had 14 points, but then he didn't play a lot in those final minutes, even though he was probably especially during the run, was one of the more effective options for the Zags.
Yeah, I there's probably a reason for it. Maybe it's defense, maybe it's rebounding, like maybe it's just you can't sit EK in that moment, right? If your team's going to play at its
Mhm.
ceiling, EK needs to be able to play in those moments. Um, but I agree with you. I think they gave Huff the rest at like 6 minutes left and just never didn't put him back in until it was almost too late. And then immediately pulled him out. And I think this is an issue that we've seen from Gonzaga before. It's an issue that we've seen from some of the other coaches in the Mark Few coaching tree. We saw it with Arizona against Purdue. They ratchet up the pressure. They go on a run. They get back into the contest, and then it seems like they just fall back into what they're trying to do rather than continuing to play the way they were playing that got them back in, that was working.
Yeah,
And
yeah, keep the pressure up.
right, and play the players that are making shots. Like I get the decision by Few to immediately pull Braden Huff after he airballed that three in the first half, because the crowd was loud. He's a freshman. You don't want him to get it into his head. Comes back in, he hits the only three of the first half, helps them go on that run, and then you don't reward him with minutes in crunch time when it was clear that the other options on the floor weren't cutting it. I don't understand, but there's probably something in that decision that we're not seeing. But just to put the 3-point shooting into perspective, because I just found this on KenPom. So against D1 opponents this season so far, Gonzaga shooting 31.7%. The last time they shot under 36% on the season was 2010, like the 2009-2010 season. And they have not shot in the 2000s under 35%, and they're shooting 31.7%.
Wow.
They are also 56.3% from two, which is their worst 2-point percentage since 2016. Um, their free throw shooting is kind of median when it comes to Gonzaga's free throw shooting, which Gonzaga plays a lot through their bigs, and so their free throw shooting tends to be relatively mediocre. But yeah, this is not a good shooting team. I mean, 2 point or 56% from two is great, but when you back that up with 31% from three, you're not spacing the floor at all. And we saw it in this game, right? Santa Clara did a really good job of bodying Graham Ike, making him turn to the shoulder he didn't want to turn to, and it just took him out of the game, and it took the rest of Gonzaga out of the game too.
I mean, it really does feel like, and there's been a lot of talk already to this point about where what Gonzaga season was starting to look like, and now with this loss, are we now solidly into the camp of Gonzaga now needs this is solidly a one bid league, and whoever wins Vegas is going to be the one team in.
Yeah, this is a Gonzaga. Let's say Gonzaga runs the table, beats Kentucky and Rep, beats San Francisco and St. Mary's on the road. Both of those teams continue to be a quad one road win. Um, beats hopefully San Francisco as the 4 seed or the 3 seed, depending on where Gonzaga gets seeded, and then loses to St. Mary's in Vegas. You're talking about like a Syracuse bid or a UCLA, like one of those bids that they get because of reputation or seemingly get because of the reputation. But yeah, I don't see a way Gonzaga does that. First of all, I think they're losing in Rupp by at least 15 to 20. Um, but also, even if they do that, that's 3 quad one wins, um, and not really a ton outside of that. And like 2 of those quad one wins are weaker uh, than a lot of other bubble teams would have. I think this is a one bid league unless Gonzaga's so close and kind of reputation or efficiency metrics kind of bump them up. But yeah, I mean, at best they're in Dayton. At worst, they're auto bid or bust.
So let's flip it over and talk about Santa Clara, because we've seen a lot. We've seen that this team has obviously a lot of potential. There's a ton of talent on the Santa Clara team, and over the last month, they've unfortunately hit bumps in the road. Teams they shouldn't have lost to, losing to Cal, losing to Yale. Like they've picked up these weird losses, but we've also seen kind of the peak. They have a win against Gonzaga now. They beat Oregon last month. They have a win against Washington State. What's kind of like this is seems like a pretty dangerous team in Santa Clara when they're right, and they aren't always right because sometimes they just kind of shoot themselves in the foot. But after seeing them in person, what's your read on this Santa Clara team and what their upside is?
Yeah, this is the second or third time this season I've seen them in
Okay.
person. I wrote after the first time that this was a team that could win the WCC. They have that level of athleticism. They have that level of talent. Um, they have maybe not the best tandem in the WCC, but certainly the tandem that I think has, at this point, the highest floor in the WCC in Carlos Marshall and Adama Ball. You throw Christoph Tilly in there, who's been able to stay on the floor a lot longer than he was at the beginning of the season. And then you saw today their shooters able to make shots around them. Like this is a team that plays hard. They go after rebounds hard. I mean, they have 2 7-footers, which even if they're not the best players, like they play hard in their 7 foot. Like that counts for something, especially in the WCC. Do I think they win the WCC? No, but I think they are. Like I said at the beginning of the season, I said this is the team. Santa Clara is the team that's best equipped to beat Gonzaga. When I thought Gonzaga was a top 20 team, and now that they're not, obviously there are other teams in the WCC that I think could beat Gonzaga. but Santa Clara can run with Gonzaga, but they also have the size at the guard spots and the size down low to play that slow, plodding, win the boards games against teams like St. Mary's. So, and they have a great coach and Herb Sendek, who, you know, doesn't get, I think, the credit he deserves, because you have Randy Bennett there, you have Mark Few there, you have the high major coaching factory that is San Francisco. But Herb Sendek has turned out two first round picks in the last 2 years. Round pick this year, but they certainly have back. Like Santa Clara's backcourt is consistently a top three backcourt in the WCC, and this year I don't think it's any different.
We really got to see that backcourt. I mean, and Carlos Marshall wasn't so great in that second half of this one, but we got to see kind of all of Adama Ball again in this one, because it really just seems like when the moment is brightest, he actually does step up uh, in that. And you talked about like maybe they don't have quite a first rounder, but it does seem like Adama Ball very easily could be that third guy in a row, at least to maybe get a draft call at some point, or like even a second rounder at this stage. Because it, to me, like the upside seems there, and now he's starting to show the promise that I think that initially he had at Arizona.
Yeah. I mean, it's Adama Ball is. I don't think it's a stretch to say he's the most athletic player in the WCC, and he's talented. I mean, there was a reason why he was a high major recruit, and you put him in this system with Herb Sendek, and it just makes it so much easier for the rest of his team, because, like I said, while they may not be the best players in the country, you have a 7-footer on the floor at all times, and that draws attention. You have one of the strongest guards, just from a just pure strength perspective, in Carlos Marshall. And I agree, he didn't have a great game, but I also think they keyed in on him a lot more than almost any other player on this team defensively. Gonzaga did, and you have shooters around him, so you can't. There's not a lot you can do to defend Adama Ball, especially when the guards defensively just don't have the quickness to keep up with him. And we saw that at the end of the game, right? Like he had the ball at all times, was going at the rim, was beating his man, and drew the foul at the end of the game because of the help defense that came over. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think, because obviously I think there are other players that are going to win WCC Player of the Year over Adama Ball, but he's a lock for first team All WCC. I think at this point, and just you know is probably the best draft prospect that's playing this season in the WCC.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I think initially, obviously, a lot of us probably had Javon Porter as that guy, but he's been banged up. Hasn't played all too much. He did have a good night tonight. I did take a look at the box score, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, Adama Ball is clearly kind of like just emerged as that guy in the WCC. And this Santa Clara team does have a kind of maybe the toughest week when you look at just thinking about WCC schedule. San Diego had to do this 1-2 only a week ago, because now Santa Clara has to see St. Mary's on Saturday. And St. Mary's looks like they might be starting to find the offense that was missing for the first month and a half of the season. Going into Saturday, is it does feel like there's always that potential for a letdown with when a team does beat Gonzaga and spend all that energy for that one. But how well do you think that this Santa Clara team is going to be able to kind of bounce back and be able to kind of bring that against St. Mary's in 2 nights?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the perfect storm, right? You had Gonzaga, who's been the the top of the conference for so long coming to town. It was Steve Nash night. So Steve Nash was in the building. Um, they had, because usually even the last time I was there for a Gonzaga game, and I don't know if they've changed it last year because I didn't go to the Gonzaga Santa Clara game last year, but usually in most games Santa Clara just has the one baseline. They had like 2/3 of sideline, some more students like up on the concourse. I think it looked like they had a student section up on like the upper level on the other side, the corner right behind the Gonzaga bench. So it was like the perfect storm of like the building was full, it was loud. It was loud both ways. You have the greatest player in your program in the building against a team that you're finally on a tier where realistically, like, people aren't necessarily surprised that you're giving them a game against a team that runs at the end of this game 6 deep. And it's like it's your win. And I think it's going to be tough to duplicate that environment against St. Mary's. I also think the way St. Mary's plays, like Gonzaga plays fast, and Santa Clara was matching their speed, and it was allowing Santa Clara to score on. And I think St. Mary's does a really good job of kind of taking the air out of the ball, which can kind of take the air out of the building at times when they're playing on the road. And like you said, it's the high of coming back down 4 with a minute left, making that last second bucket on the foul, and then getting the interception on the pass on what could have resulted in a shot to tie the game, or win the game. I don't know how you replicate that, but if if there's any team in this conference that could beat, like I say, that could beat Gonzaga and St. Mary's, it's Santa Clara. And if there's any team that can beat them back to back, it's certainly Santa Clara.
Our St. Mary's did pick up their win tonight. I mean, they just smacked Portland. Final was just a few minutes ago, 95-52 in Moraga. Aiden Mahaney had 25 tonight. Aiden Mahaney's had 25 twice in the first 3 games of WCC play. And yes, that was one's against San Diego, one is against Portland. So you do take that with a grain of salt to an extent. But Mahaney has looked better over the last couple of weeks. Do you think that the St. Mary's offense is starting to is can you read too much into what we've seen to this point? Because we've seen them explode on Portland. They did it to San Diego. They struggled a bit more against LMU, which you kind of would expect on the road. So it because I've definitely seen some people say like, "Oh, St. Mary's is back. St. Mary's is back." Like, I'm not gonna fully go there quite yet because it feels like I need to see them do it against a better team than the bottom half of the WCC.
I think what we've seen the past few weeks from Marcialonis and Mitchell Saxon has me believing that this St. Mary's team is back. Because it was frustrating watching those two play the first month and a half of the season. As a non-St. Mary's fan, it was frustrating. I can only imagine what it was like for you. But they've really turned it on. And I think that's why Mahaney has looked so much better, is because he's not the only one. Like, Aiden Mahaney for the first month and a half of the season was Anton Watson tonight. And I think that's starting to change, and I think that's only going to make St. Mary's better. I think we are at the point. If St. Mary's beats Santa Clara on Saturday, because I think Gonzaga doesn't play on Saturday. So if St. Mary's
Yeah,
beats
they have
Santa
Saturday
Clara
off.
on Saturday, like, St. Mary's is clearly the favorite at that point to win the WCC.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. Like this, it really seems like the difference that this team had is like that someone need to come along for the ride with Mahaney, and early on it was nobody, and that was the really challenging thing that Marshall Onis didn't get going for a while, Joshua Jefferson didn't get going for a while, Mitchell Saxon didn't get going for a while, and Alex Dukas has kind of been hit and miss here and there. Dukas did have 17 tonight out of nowhere. He has a good offensive night. He went 5 for 7 from three, which also is a good sign to see. But yeah, the St. Mary's, I'm almost like maybe more cautious about the St. Mary's team because we've seen it too often that they'll have these large offensive droughts, and obviously there was no offensive drought tonight. Even Cade Bennett got into the action and had a bucket in this one, so it really was like everybody got involved in the game to for St. Mary's. But going in against Santa Clara, we talked about the size a little bit. That is the one thing that maybe is going to be one of the key matchups is like that Mitchell Saxon and Christoph Tilley kind of back and forth of we know Saxon has the experience. We know that he's been obviously he was a first teamer last year. Christoph Tilley, incredibly talented, and still a little bit on the raw side. But we saw what they were able to do against EK tonight. So that may be the one area where there's going to be a little bit of concern. Also, just how do you match up with Adama Ball? Because I don't see the guy on the St. Mary's roster who's going to be able to really bother him. Then again, I don't know if that guy exists in the WCC at all.
Yeah, no, I don't think he does. I think what gives me more confidence about this St. Mary's team moving forward is just how well, even compared to the past years, but like especially this year, how well this team rebounds the ball. Like Mitchell Saxon started off slow, but he's a monster on the offensive boards. And so even if you go through droughts now, like St. Mary's is just getting second and third opportunities on the offensive end, um, which I think helps a team that can't hit shots. And what we saw with Gonzaga tonight was that they were missing shots and then not getting rebounds. And that's a bad combination. St. Mary's can go through droughts all they want. If they're the sixth best offensive rebounding team in the country and the 10th best defensive rebounding team in the country, they're going to win a lot of games ugly that way. And so I do think that they run the risk against like a Santa Clara. If Santa Clara gets hot like they did tonight from deep, they run the risk of not being able to keep up. But I also think, given their tempo of play, given how locked in they are, and given how well they rebound compared to a Gonzaga, uh, I don't have as big a hesitancy to call them the favorite in the WCC. And maybe it's because I'm not a St. Mary's fan. So I don't have that, oh, I need to keep myself in check. And maybe that's because I'm a Gonzaga fan and I'm keeping myself in check. But I do think that St. Mary's floor might be the highest in the WCC, or is probably the highest in the WCC.
So one of the other teams I think that we'll gonna move on to I'll head down to San Diego where USF did knock off the Toreros 83-63. This USF team has been maybe the most consistent of any of the teams in the WCC. I feel to this point, and I know they haven't had that marquee win. They've had opportunities. What the four losses they've had is by a combined 21 points. But they just seem to kind of go about their business. And yes, they did not look good at all against Pacific a week ago, but it seemed like they righted the ship tonight, knock around San Diego by 20. Mobo 19, 11, and 7. He was 8 for 8 from the field, which it he seems like the maybe like the biggest not surprise, but just maybe it was just like the we didn't expect to see it on the offensive end as much as we thought we might from him coming into the year.
Yeah, I mean, if the season were to end today, he's the WCC Player of the Year, and I don't know if it's close. Like, I think he's running away with the award, and I don't think we expected that. But I don't think we expected that given the pieces around him, right? Because if you were to look at the San Francisco roster and go, who's going to be the top option? Like, who's going to be the top player on this team? 95% of people would probably say Mongolian Mike, who's been good this season. But like, you have him, you have Mobo, you have Malik Thomas and Newberry, who are shooting like 40+% from deep. You run pretty deep as a roster. You have a coach who comes from the same mindset as like as Kyle Smith and Todd Golden, and just prepping his team and knowing, like, very, very analytics driven. And when you have a roster like he has, it works. It just works. And so they don't have the marquee win. They don't have the strength of schedule that you see from some of these other teams in the conference, but they have been the most consistent. Everyone knows what their role is. Everyone plays their role well. I just think ceiling wise, I think they're probably third or fourth in the conference. Floor wise, I feel the same way, but they've consistently been playing towards their ceiling, which is a good sign heading into the last month and a half of the season.
Yeah, it's one of the things with this USF team, because I do feel like that they have, and I talked about it before the year, that it felt to me like amongst the other, like the group of three, like Santa Clara, USF, and LMU, that they had the highest floor. That because this was a team that just again knows their roles, kind of knows how to operate, that you could almost pencil them in for 20 wins because that's what they've done 6 of the last 7 years. You kind of know exactly what USF's going to do on that front. But then we've gotten some pleasant surprises with some of the guys on the roster. Mobo obviously being one of them. Newberry, I think, has been just incredible within his role this year to this point. Marcus Williams has been, I think not like better than expected, but I think he has delivered on everything that we thought could happen with him in that role. I mean, even if Mongolian Mike hasn't actually hit to the point of where a lot of people thought, that's almost now anything you get from him is a bonus to an extent. This USF team does, like, to me at least, like it does seem like defensively, that's the other thing. They're so versatile defensively, like because like they have so many interchangeable parts that like they have a slew of guys between 6'5" and 6'8" that all can just guard like crazy. And I think that's
Yeah,
one
their
of
point guard is really small, like whoever they play at point, whether it's Williams or
Beasley.
Beasley, is super small. And then everyone else, like Malik Thomas, I guess he's
Six
above average
five.
length, 6'4", 6'5". He's above average length, but everyone else is like 6'8" or longer. So like it is a well-oiled machine on the hilltop right now.
So um is so looking overall at what we've seen to this point, and I'll get you out of here, let you get some sleep after a long day. Uh, what going through the rest of this season, maybe before we get through the first half, do you think we're going to see? How do you think the top four are going to stack up by the time we get to the end of the first half of conference play?
I'm trying to figure out. Okay, so I would say that conference play, we are going to see St. Mary's. I think St. Mary's wins this weekend, even on the road. So I think St. Mary's is going to be that top overall seed. I think I think Gonzaga might sneak into like that second seed because Santa Clara plays St. Mary's twice before the end of January. Um, and then Santa Clara, then San Francisco is how
I think
I would stack it up. San Francisco plays at Gonzaga and home to St. Mary's. So yeah, that's Gonzaga really like they get San Francisco at home, and that's basically it until the end of January. Yeah, it's Pepperdine on the road, San Diego on the road, San Francisco at home, Pacific on the
yeah.
road, Loyola Marymount at home. So
I mean,
like
Gonzaga did have a pretty. I mean, tonight aside, had a pretty soft start to conference play. Like
right,
Pepperdine and San Diego
right.
twice.
I think Saint. If I were to predict right now, St. Mary's will be undefeated by the end of January. Gonzaga will have the one loss to Santa Clara. Santa Clara will have two to St. Mary's. Maybe Santa Clara is still at the four because San Francisco has two losses. So I'd go Santa Clara then San Francisco in that pecking order as the top four. So
Oh man, I mean, this is going to be a wild rest of conference play. Um, and it'll be interesting to kind of see like how this all plays out and where we end up. Um,
if
I'm
St.
gonna
Mary's,
keep,
this is a question for you. If St. Mary's
yeah,
wins the next two road games, so they're on the road against Santa Clara, on the road against San Francisco, and then
yes,
they beat Santa Clara at home. So they enter February undefeated, having played two of the toughest three road games in the conference. Like, what are your what's your confidence finish with one loss or less
overall for a conference play.
overall? Yeah. So I'll give
I
them
if
the one loss on the road at Gonzaga.
I would say if they are able to take care of Santa Clara and USF on the road, that I think it's pretty strong. I would probably give it maybe like a 70% confidence that they would finish with only the one loss if they are able to take care of Santa Clara and USF in the next couple of weeks. Because the only other, again, if I'm assuming the Gonzaga loss in Spokane, I've already played the other tough road game, and that's LMU, and I've already picked up the win there. So if they somehow got by that, they would look really good heading into that. And again, if you're looking at what 14-2, 15-1 overall going into Vegas, that St. Mary's team metrically starts to actually look somehow a lot better than where we thought they were just a few weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because I
And
mean, you look at their losses and they lose at home, but like the loss to Weber State and the loss to Missouri State are bad at home losses. But like to decent teams in their conference, just not good overall. Other four losses on their schedule starting to look losses aren't good, but they're starting to look a lot less
right,
bad than they were mid-December. Um, and so I
right,
still don't think St. Mary's, I think, has to go undefeated through the final game of Vegas, and then they could lose to Gonzaga, and I think they might have an argument, but I think that'll be tough. I think they're a team like Gonzaga. They have to win in Vegas, which is going to make Vegas really fun. Um,
yes,
and I just don't know. Like, if you're a one seed St. Mary's, who do you want as your four seed? Because
not Santa Clara, not Santa
not Santa
Clara.
Clara. Like, if you're St. Mary's as the one seed, is Gonzaga your preferred four seed at this point? Not Santa Clara. Do you
Definitely
want
not.
to play San Francisco off a day break and a win?
Ooh, that's that is
You're a
that's a
good
tough,
rebounding team, so going up against a Gonzaga team that can't shoot threes.
yeah. Or but a USF team that I have a size advantage on.
Yeah,
I This is also for some odd reason, if you look just over the series, like USF has just not done well against St. Mary's over the years. And somehow Santa Clara gives them more problems. And largely, I think it's because, again, like the guard play is a huge component to that. Like Santa Clara over the years just had really good guards. And even though obviously we know like USF has had like Bouye and Shabazz, and like they've had their share of really good guards as well, for some odd reason, like USF has had this more trouble with St. Mary's than Santa Clara does.
I
So
was
I,
just trying to say that
to me,
you might want to take in that first game, and then hope it's San
somehow
Francisco
Gonzaga
beating.
ends up a 4 seed.
Is it out of the realm of possibility?
Here's I think the out of the realm of possibility, and I think here's the problem is like I feel like Santa Clara or USF are going to lose a game they're not supposed to. They're going to somehow
That's
lose.
fair.
So one of them is going to lose to Portland. One of them is going to lose to Pepperdine. One of them is going to lose, maybe not to San Diego, but like for some, considering at least for Santa Clara, we've seen their inconsistency enough that they could actually lose to a team they're not supposed to. I at least
That's
have
fair.
this season evidence that it's possible.
That I don't know.
So
I'm
that's
just
maybe
looking at
the
it right
only reason
now,
I would,
and
because
it looks like
in that
Gonzaga and
scenario, that means
go ahead.
because what? Because like right now, like you have to. I would assume that USF beats Gonzaga at least once. That scenario, I think, says that,
Yes,
and I think it's very possible at Chase Center. I mean, I don't see it happening up in Spokane, but that Chase Center game, like that 1-2 punch, I mean, that's a critical point for Gonzaga's season too. Like I've had that week circled at the end of the year, and now it's even almost more critical. The They're going to be at Chase Center at in Moraga and back to back or in one weekend. That's and based off just what I saw because I went to the game at Chase Center when they played Minnesota. USF played Minnesota. They filled the Dons fans filled that building pretty well. Like I actually have way more confidence now that they're going to keep a lot of the Gonzaga fans out of that facility.
no, it's I still think Gonzaga finishes as the 2 seed, but like it's an interesting question because there are 3 teams in the WCC that shoot under what I think San Francisco's seventh in the WC or sixth in the WCC at like 34.9% from deep. Um, and then the bottom 3 teams are all in like the 31% against D1 teams. Gonzaga's part of that 3, the other 2 being Portland and Pacific. Um, like Gonzaga just doesn't strike me as a team that can get hot against good competition. We haven't seen it yet,
No.
or get
Do
hot and
we
stay hot.
Do you think there's any chance that Gonzaga or Mark Few starts to utilize more of that bench? Because I know like very that's history would tell us no, he's never going to use the bench. He's not going to dig that deep into it. But is there a situation where his hand might be forced because he's not getting the production out of the guys that are playing?
It's shrinking. It's he didn't trust Dusty, so Dusty didn't play the final like 15 minutes of that game.
Yeah.
He didn't trust Braden Huff against some of the other teams earlier in December, so he didn't play at the end of that game. Sure, Yo got more minutes, like during foul trouble at points, but like this is, and I said it before the season. This Gonzaga team has no. So no, this is the deepest Gonzaga team. Mark Few generally runs like 7 or 8 guys out there. You're lucky if in a close game against a good team you get 6.
Yeah. And this is the thing. It's like it's like he usually only runs about seven guys, but usually there's 8 and 9 are capable of being in that rotation. Right
Right.
now, it doesn't even look like that's that's not even an option. Like 8 and 9
7
are
and
not going to
8.
get in the rotation.
7 and
Yeah.
8 aren't capable of being in that rotation, and 7 changes, right? You usually 6
Yeah.
guys who can be out there, but it's one of those things where he has, what, 3 quadrant 1 right now, 3 quadrant 1 opportunities left. The first one of those quadrant 1 opportunities he has left is February 10th. The other 2 are February 29th and March 2nd. So, like, he doesn't even have the opportunity to be like, "Well, we lost to Kentucky and we still have all of these games left. We lost to San Francisco. We still have all of these games left." Things up. Like,
Yeah.
the chances that they get an at-large bid are 1%, but they're not 0%. So does he just continue to play until there's, like, no shot? It's so late that he just has to continue what he's doing because he can't change things up with 2 weeks left in the season. Um, I don't know. I don't know.
This
There's a lot of bad
this
vibes coming out of this Gonzaga team. And, like, I don't think it's from a I think they genuinely like each other.
mm,
It's just everything else seems off.
yeah, I mean, I think we're also just so not used to seeing a Gonzaga team struggle like this. And it's obviously also it's been a while since they've been a borderline team, but to an extent, like as someone who is a Gonzaga fan, like someone like who is so like has obviously been close to this program, and we haven't seen this team not make the NCAA tournament in 25 years. Like, like I'm kind of curious if there's been an entire generation, multiple generations that have not seen this team not make the tournament. What what sort of where is the panic meter going to be if we get to say that final week of the regular season and it's still looking like it is Vegas or bust?
Again, Gonzaga was there in 2016. You felt like they could win in Vegas. Like, I genuinely felt like that 2016 team could beat St. Mary's in Vegas. Um, this team, I'm not confident. I'm not confident Gonzaga doesn't get swept by St. Mary's.
Is is there any does it also change not only that aspect, but as we've already seen tonight, that there's more than one team capable of beating Gonzaga? And in my mind, there's actually three in the league, which again, like that might actually be one of like the it says something about where Gonzaga is at a program, but I think it also does say something to an extent about what the work that Santa Clara and USF have done. Because I think both of them, along with St. Mary's, are are capable of doing the same thing. They could win in Vegas as well. This I know a lot of people have been saying like this is wide open as the WCC has been in a long time, and I think the result tonight really now opens that door and that possibility.
Yeah, and it's not like we talked about Santa Clara kind of having a hangover game against possibly having a hangover game against St. Mary's. Gonzaga really doesn't have like a true trap game in the sense that they're playing a team they should beat before a team that's much tougher until the end of the season, where they play Santa Clara, San Francisco, St. Mary's, all 3 in a row, assuming they're the 2 seed in the conference, then they'd probably be playing one of those teams again, and then one of those teams again, 5 games in a row if they make the finals of the WCC tournament. Like, this schedule lends itself, I think, to Gonzaga figuring things out, but also doesn't give them a lot of breathing room if they get to the end of the season and still haven't.
And that is just the unusual place. We're just so used to seeing this team, especially over the last 6, 7 years, that by the time they get to March, it's like it's a wrap. Like we already know they're in. We already know roughly what seed they're going to be, like 1, 2, 3. Like that's kind of now it's just positioning yourself. That's really what it's been. And now we're at a position where not only could it's not even that, it's they are they even going to get in? Could they even sniff it at large? Might they get a reputation pull? Can they can they even beat the 3 teams that are also gonna be in the mix with them? And I think that's the fact that that is now a question does say a lot about where we are today with this program, and maybe to an extent, we've seen this program be such on an incredible run. Like, there aren't many programs who go to the NCAA tournament for this many consecutive years. The fact that it's happened is in and of itself just like the incredible feat, and maybe if it does end this year, there will be kind of like this take a step back and really kind of like be able to appreciate what Gonzaga has been able to accomplish. But yeah, it's just I think as someone who went to one of the other schools, multiple of the other schools in the WCC, and seeing this happen to Gonzaga, it is just it is a foreign place, even I think for many of us, to see it happening to this program of all places.
Yeah, yeah, it's rough, um, but I don't know. To me, it's more an issue of like the omen was bad in the summer for this team. And I don't want to say it's because Tommy Lloyd left, because I really don't think that's the reason. I think part of the reason is NIL. Um, because if and they won't say it, but if Ryan Nemhard is American and not Canadian, does he end up at Gonzaga?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because if he's American, he has no visa issues. He could get $800,000 thrown at him
Mhm.
left, right, and center by any number of teams. Um, so I don't know. I don't know. And they're going to have to figure it out. I don't think switching conferences is going to instantly help. I'm actually more on the like, it's not too late in my mind to reevaluate the position with the Mountain West for Gonzaga. Because at this point, it's not about if they miss the tournament this year, it's no longer about we need to make the tournament every year. It's to secure our brand from a landslide effect that, I'm a big supporter of NIL, um, but I do recognize that certain brands and certain conferences get more eyes on them. And
Mhm.
you need those TV deals to get eyes on players. And Gonzaga doesn't have the booster value to just pay these players under the name of NIL. Like they need true NIL deals, and I don't know if that's going to happen to the level they need it to happen in the WCC.
Mhm. I mean, the
And
one
it
of the things, I mean, I
missed on some players, right? Graham EK hasn't looked
Mhm.
like what we thought he was going to look like, and we should have known coming off the injury that he wasn't going to be as comfortable on his feet as a Drew Timmy.
Mhm.
Ryan Nemhard has struggled, I think, to the style of Gonzaga's tempo. Um, and some of these Nolan Hickman is good, not great. I love Nolan Hickman to do
Mhm.
to try and win, but that and I don't even want to call it a myth, but player on this team, but he needs to be more of a role player and not a 40 minutes per player. So we'll see. I'm not pressing the panic button. Um, so much as I am just kind of laying out where Gonzaga stands this season.
Yep. Like, so as far as like possibilities like with realignment, one of the things that has been stuck in my head with the partnership with Washington State and Oregon State as they figure out the Pac-12 and what that's going to look like. It almost feels like that what I mean, initially it's what they're going to do is they're going to try to poach, it feels like, the Mountain West. So they're going to try to take probably a bunch of those teams with them. And with the now that they control the giant pot from the Pac-12, that makes even more sense that they'll be able to just pay exit fees for some of the teams they want, poach whoever from the American that they're going to take. Does the Pac-12 even start to re-enter the conversation for the likes of Gonzaga as well? Like, because now you're not dealing with the likes of, say, Cal and Stanford, who, to an extent, were largely some of the reasons that the schools, smaller schools or religiously affiliated schools, weren't even considered.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
And so, again, you talk about brand,
it
and
has to be
that's, I mean,
Washington.
Pac-12 is going to,
Right. I mean, it has to be one of those things, though, that either Washington State or Gonzaga is not going to get it on the first wave. State is 50% of the voting power in the Pac-12.
yeah,
So that's the biggest hurdle, right? It is getting Washington State to agree to allow Gonzaga into the conference, given the proximity overlapping recruiting base. But I certainly think so. Like, I don't think Gonzaga is going away as a brand in college basketball. It's going to take more for them to go away, and even then, like, Dayton hasn't gone away as a brand in college basketball, and season in 2020, but they haven't been, this fantastic team year in and year out every single season over the last decade. So, like, I don't think the Gonzaga brand's, but I do think the writing is kind of on the wall that they need to get more exposure to continue recruits or to keep into their junior and senior seasons. So,
all right. Crazy night for the WCC. Santa Clara does upset Gonzaga, uh, 77-76. Want to thank Connor Hope one more time for hopping on, chatting about what's going on in the WCC. I'll have up a new episode next week. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Do all the follows on social media. Follow Connor also on on social media at Connor Hope CBB. So do that as well. Uh, Thanks, Connor, one more time for hopping on. And we'll definitely have you back on down the road.